Hey you guys, it's Peter, and welcome to my channel, Peterisms, where I tell stories of my life and just little things that I've learned as I've grown into the person that I am today. And yesterday, I didn't really do a Soulful Sunday, even though I did read a meditation. I didn't really do a Soulful Sunday. So I kind of wanted to do a Meaningful Monday instead of a Soulful Sunday today, or a Meditation Monday, Meditating Monday. And so I went in there and I just randomly picked a meditation book. A Time to Be Free, Daily Meditations for Enhancing Self-Esteem, by the author of A Day at a Time and A New Day, which are both recovery meditation books. They're fantastic. This one, my dad gave me when I got out of treatment 23 years and 8 months ago. So, I like to reflect on it a lot because for me, my recovery and my need to use back in the day really did stem. There was a lot of it that was about my lack of self-esteem, or what I call today self-concept. And you know, self-esteem or self-concept can come from feelings of not being worthy, not being deserving, not being good enough in comparison to other people. I think that often starts in the home too. And you know, having grown up with an alcoholic mother, even though I knew that she loved me and she would say that, her behavior sometimes felt different, if that makes sense. I also think having gone through, you know, parents that were divorced and I was the only child, it was this back and forth thing that happened. And so, you know, there were times when it was inconvenient for one parent to have me or the other, and I definitely felt that. So, you know, for me today, it's been having to go back and unravel all of that, and I don't know, be honest with myself. And I think, you know, one of the things when you grow up and you become an adult is that you can kind of sympathize with your parents to some degree because you can kind of understand what they may have been going through at that time, and that, you know, no adult, no parent, no husband, wife, or whatever is perfect. And so you kind of start understanding a little bit what other people go through, if that makes sense. So anyway, today's meditation, September 3rd. It's been a while, but the images are still etched sharply in our minds. Dad passes out after being in a drunken rage, and not a word is said about his behavior. We come home from school bursting with pride, and as usual, no one wants to hear about it. We have a serious problem, and instead of guidance, we get the same old guilt-provoking, salt-in-the-wound message, I blame myself for the way you turned out. If there was a common denominator in our dysfunctional families, clearly it was a lack of honest and open communication. What exchanges there were tended to be manipulative, confusing, and hostile. Those were the influences that shaped our ability to communicate. No wonder there was such disharmony and tension in so many of our relationships. Learning to be better communicators is a continuing challenge, but we're making progress. We're putting aside the negative influences of the past and learning from scratch. We're communicating in ways that clear the air instead of causing pain. We're being as honest and straightforward as we can. We're trying to bring the spirit of love and caring into what we say and how we say it. Thought for today. Do I say what I mean and mean what I say? So this is a really interesting meditation for me because it goes so much deeper than just, well, we have poor communication or we don't really know how to communicate with each other. Really what it's saying is, what are what's the backstory for why you're saying what you say, you know? And it was interesting to me that it was said in here, you know, Dad passes out after being in a drunken rage and not a word is said about his behavior. And I definitely grew up in that environment. Like, now my mother very rarely had drunken rages. She would just pass out, but I would be full of fear because I didn't know what to do, how to take care of her. You know, I had a lot of fear of my mom dying when I was younger because I didn't know, like, I didn't understand passing out, if that made sense. And so I was fear, you know, I can remember coming home sometimes and my mother, and not often, and I'm not excusing her behavior, but not often, but there were times when I would come home and by 6 or 7, she was passed out. Now, 6 or 7, you know, in the evening, and I am typically going to bed at like 10 to midnight, you know, as a elementary school student, it's pretty terrifying, you know, like, and then the next night you're putting yourself together, your mother's laying you down, reading you a story, and it's like, this is so confusing. And it's this, I hate to use this word, but it's this totally like this mind fuck that we do to family members when they have no idea like what to expect, you know, when they walk through the door. And that was definitely the case with me, is I never knew what to expect. So we can call that lack of communication, sure, but the lack of communication came in the silence, you know? And I very much was taught this rule in my family. What happens in the family, we don't talk outside of the family, you know what I mean? Not until my mom and I both got sober were we like, hey, just open book it, you know what I mean? And we both had that attitude as we got sober. Now, she didn't talk about it as much because she worked in the school system, and she was afraid the stigma that would be attached to a teacher that was also an alcoholic, whether they were sober or not. And I understand that because I witnessed that a lot, you know? But when I was growing up, before my mom got sober, that was it. We don't talk about this. And it was almost not even stated. It didn't even, you want to talk about lack of communication. There was no communication. I mean, it was almost not even stated. It was, I didn't want to be made fun of for having a drunk mom, you know? So I never told anybody about it. My dad had a very good idea of what her drinking patterns was like, and he would ask me every day, he would say, are things okay? And what that meant was, is your mom okay today? And that's kind of how we just dealt with things for 18 years of my life, you know? And I look back on that and I think, wow, that's kind of some sick and twisted, you know, like conversations that we weren't having, you know, we weren't really coming out. But how do you teach an 8-year-old to have a conversation with a parent about their drinking or their drugging? I mean, if you know, let me know, because I don't know how to teach somebody to have that conversation. And then when they say in here, we come home from school bursting with pride, and as usual, no one wants to hear about it. Now, that was not my experience. I had 2 parents that were very, very supportive emotionally, you know, all that kind of stuff. But there were times that my mother was unable to be that for me. Like I said, I could come home from school and she could, you know, often things happen that I wasn't aware of. So, you know, like let's say if my mom and dad had an argument at 3 o'clock on the phone and my mother had been drinking gin and tonic since then, and I walk in the door at 3:15 and I'm excited to show her a paper that I got an A on, she was in no position to want to hear about that, you know? And she would say things like, oh, that's great, go put it on the refrigerator, but you could tell she was completely checked out. And I dealt with a checked out mother a lot, right? So as I got older, that felt like punishment to me. So what I would do to people, you know, ex-boyfriends of mine, friends in my life, things like that, even my own mother, was, even in sobriety I did this, okay? Was that when, you know, like, you didn't give me the attention I needed or you didn't make me feel the way that I wanted to feel, I was going to punish you by just writing you off a little bit. And that's where we use communication as punishment instead of saying to somebody, hey, you know, like yesterday that really hurt me, Mom, like, but like I'm saying, like, you know, we learn these behaviors when we're a kid. How do you teach an 8 or a 9 or 10-year-old to communicate that way? You know, you can't. So, and then the other one, we have a serious problem, and instead of guidance, we get the same old guilt-provoking, salt-in-the-wound message, I blame myself for the way you turned out. Now, I didn't get that exact message. My foot is itching like crazy right now. I didn't get that exact same message, but I've talked a lot about this on my vlog. The guilt that my mom had for my drinking and drugging was overwhelming. I mean, she always was like, it's my fault, blah, 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 whatever. And I wanted to sometimes say to her, yeah, then quit drinking, you know? Like, if you really take so much responsibility for my drinking and my drugging and me getting busted and ending up in treatment programs, stop drinking, you know? Shut up about it then. But that was never the conversation we'd have because my mother, you know, we talk about addiction being selfish and self-centered, so everything was about her. So anything that happened to me, which is why the last time that I went through treatment, when they said, you know, you need to have family members come in here, I said, not my mother, because she's going to come in here and she's going to make this whole thing about herself. Because see, I had already been through that, you know, with getting in trouble in school and, you know, having things turned around and going to treatment programs and all this kind of stuff. And it was always turned around to my mom, you know, like, oh God, this is my fault. You know, I should have been harder on you. I should have done this. You know, it was always that. And the thing is with guilt is that if you can assume guilt for somebody else's behaviors, then you can also go back in time and change it, right? And this is the part that I've talked about in my vlogs. So like with my mom, it was if she could say, oh, this is all my fault. You know, if I could have just done A, B, and C, you wouldn't have turned out the way that you are today. But so then she could go back in time in her head and say, if I could change this, things would be different. But the reason that I wouldn't allow her to do that down the road was I worked very hard on my sobriety and my recovery. I worked very hard on being a better person on a daily basis. And if she owned my past, then she owned my future, and that's not fair. And I own my future today, you know, and I'm the one that does the work for all of that, not her then nor now. Did she contribute to that? Absolutely. But I think at the core, what we're talking about is really what is at the basis? What is the root for the way that we communicate with people? You know, is it out of fear? Is it out of attention-seeking behavior? You know, is it because a lot of how I communicated with my mom was out of fear, but on the other hand, a lot of how I communicated with my dad was that I wanted validation from him. So they're two completely different things. So the way that I communicated with my mom and the way that I communicated with my dad was completely different. You know, there were times that I was very mean to my mom and talking to her when I was younger. With my dad, I would never have spoken to him that way. And my mom could never understand that. And now looking back on it, what I understand is that my root causes for wanting to talk to them, what I was looking for, what I was needing, was completely different from the other person. So for my mom, you know, I was just wanting her to be okay and I didn't want to have to worry about her. But for my dad, I wanted validation, which I got. So, you know, anytime that I would say something to my dad and he would give me validation, it felt good, right? So I would communicate to him in similar ways. But with my mom, I just got frustrated and angry. So I talked to her out of frustration and anger and fear. So I think it is important to understand and kind of look at the patterns with the people in your life. So maybe sit down, you know, and list all the people that you have in your life and what your communication pattern is like with them, and look and see, why is it based in this? What is it that I'm really looking for from this person, you know? What am I, and can I change that, you know? And I do think, like with my friend Tanya, that's one of the reasons why in 23 and a half or 22 and a half years of being friends, we've really only had one argument, because we're not looking for validation from the other person. We're not looking for acceptance. We're really just looking for somebody to talk to, you know, somebody to have a conversation with. So if we don't agree necessarily on our opinions of world issues or things that are going on, that's okay. We can have a conversation about it because we're not needing something from the other person. I need her loyalty. I need her love. I don't need her to agree with my opinion. You know what I mean? And I think that when you start looking at things like that, that's where you can start, you know, really getting to the root of it. And like with marriage, it's exactly the same thing. You know, you have to look at, why are you communicating to your partner that way or in a relationship? And I could do a whole video about that, so maybe I will down the road, because Alex and I, you know, since we've been in counseling, have really learned new ways to communicate to each other. And we still fall back into old patterns at times. You know, nobody's perfect, you know, but it's a learning curve that you go forward in life, and you continue to try to learn how you're communicating with people. But to understand why you communicate with somebody, or why you're getting frustrated with them, or yelling, or, you know, not saying how you really feel, because a lot of people feel like, I can't say to somebody how I really feel. Well, why not? What's behind that? What's the backstory? And looking at the root cause as to why you communicate in a certain manner with somebody, I think is really important as well, you know, because then we understand what's stopping us, what's the obstacle in the place of us not being able to have that conversation. And we have to know that before we can have open and honest communication patterns with people. So let me know what you think in the comment section below. I love you, and I hope you are having a wonderful week, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.